Imagine just for a moment that you're walking through the dense, vibrant canopy of the Amazon rainforest. The air is thick, and the environment around you is absolutely bursting with life. You've got this constant, chaotic symphony of insect hums, monkey calls, and the intricate songs of canopy birds. It's loud, sure, but it's a natural rhythm, right? Well now, imagine that in a split second, the entire forest goes completely dead silent. The birds just stop mid-song. The insects quiet down. It's this eerie, suffocating hush. If you were standing right there, a deep, ancient chill would immediately run down your spine. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack the fascinating evolutionary and neurological reasons behind why humans are, quite literally, terrified of the void.
Section 1. The Silent Wood, Nature's Ultimate Warning. This brings us right to a really fascinating central paradox of human psychology. We constantly claim that we want peace and quiet. We pay good money for remote cabins or those fancy noise-canceling headphones just to escape the relentless hum of modern life. And yet, when we actually find ourselves in absolute, total silence, like during a power outage in the middle of the night, we often start to panic.
Okay, let's dive into this. The answer really lies in understanding that true silence in nature is almost never a sign of peace. To fully grasp this, you have to imagine the sudden, terrifying absence of noise in a bustling ecosystem. For animals out in the wild, an abrupt drop in ambient sound isn't relaxing at all. It's actually the ultimate alarm bell.
Down in the Amazon, researchers studying what they call the Internet of the Forest found something amazing. When small canopy birds, like the white-fronted nunbird, spot a hawk or an aerial predator gliding above, they stop singing. This sudden silence acts as a massive shared eavesdropping network. It alters the entire soundscape, acting as a forest-wide warning that mortal danger is, quite literally, hanging right over their heads.
Section 2. The Ecology of Fear. Why we didn't hide. To understand why this still impacts us today, we actually need to take a quick trip back into our ancestral past. Let's leave the forest and step out onto the open, dangerous savannas where early humans were evolving. We weren't always apex predators, For millions of years, we were very much on the menu.
And this brilliantly illustrates a major divergence in evolutionary survival tactics. Most prey animals use something called crypsis, which basically means they use silence, stealth, and hiding to survive. But early humans, we evolved on open ground, where hiding just wasn't always an option. So we adopted aposematism. We used loud, collective noise, think choral singing, rhythmic stomping and shouting, to create an intimidating wall of sound. This acoustic shield signaled group unity and kept predators at bay.
Because our survival literally depended on this loud collective shield, our brains adapted to monitor it constantly. This is known in the research as the sentinel hypothesis. Our neurology evolved to actively scan the environment for danger the exact moment our collective noise dropped. So for our ancestors, silence didn't mean it was time to kick back and relax. It meant our protective wall of sound was broken, we were separated, and an ambush was imminent.
You can actually see this evolutionary dread perfectly mirrored in modern horror cinema. Think of the movie A Quiet Place, or really any tense thriller. Filmmakers absolutely know that stripping away our acoustic safety net leaves us feeling psychologically unmoored and incredibly exposed. The second the background noise drops, our ancient threat detection systems just light right up.
Section 3. The World's Quietest Rooms, Becoming the Sound. So what happens when we artificially recreate this total void today? Let's transition from the ancient silent forest to the modern clinical foam-wedged walls of anechoic chambers. These are places like Orfield Labs in Minnesota or Microsoft's headquarters, which are specifically engineered to absorb nearly all sound.
These rooms hold Guinness World Records for a reason. They can reach a staggering negative 24.9 decibels. That is profoundly quiet. Since the human threshold for hearing basically starts at 0, this level of silence is literally negative. It's an absence of sound so deep that it is entirely unnatural to our biology.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens to your perception in that void. When all external noise is completely stripped away, the brain just turns up its internal microphone. You become the sound. Visitors describe a visceral, almost horrifying experience, hearing the rush of their own blood, the churning of their stomach, and yes, even the crisp, loud snap of their own eyelids blinking. Wild, right?
This extreme sensory deprivation actually leads to a rapid psychological and physiological collapse. Within just 5 minutes, visitors report intense tinnitus. By 15 minutes, the pressure builds and they start seeing dancing lights. Around the 30-minute mark, because the brain heavily relies on sound echoes to orient the body in space, visitors literally lose their balance and have to sit down. This is exactly why there is a legendary 45-minute barrier that almost no one can last past. It is just unbearably disorienting.
Section 4. The brain's neural revolt, a mind unmoored. To really understand that rapid breakdown, we need to shift our focus inward. Let's look at the terrifying neurological mechanisms that trigger when the human brain is starved of sensory input. Because, as it turns out, the brain doesn't just quietly power down in the dark, it stages a massive revolt.
A huge part of this revolt happens in the default mode network, or the DMN. This network is essentially the neurological seat of the self. It's the part that hums along when you are daydreaming or reflecting. But when you strip away all external stimuli, the DMN doesn't just activate, it shifts into absolute overdrive.
And this DMN hyperactivity forces a really harsh, unfiltered confrontation with our inner world. Without the distraction of external noise, your mind gets flooded with self-referential thoughts. It amplifies rumination over past regrets and mental perspection, which is basically your brain simulating future threats. For a lot of people, silence rapidly becomes an inescapable echo chamber of worry.
Deeper inside the brain, your thalamus, which acts as the main relay station for sensory data, goes into full-on crisis mode. Starved of real information, it absolutely refuses to sit idle. It starts generating spontaneous electrical signals. Your cortex, which is desperate for any data it can get its hands on, interprets these phantom signals as vivid, sometimes terrifying hallucinations. You essentially begin dreaming while completely awake.
Section 5. Sedatophobia and modern noise. Fearing the void. For most of us, everything we just talked about is just an uncomfortable quirk of human biology. But for a growing number of people living in our hyper-stimulated world, this evolutionary and neurological discomfort actually develops into a paralyzing clinical condition.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a clinical condition known as sedatophobia. This is an intense, completely irrational fear of silence. People suffering from this don't just dislike the quiet. A silent room can trigger a full-blown physiological panic attack, complete with racing heartbeats, nausea, and an overwhelming dread. They become utterly dependent on constant background noise just to function normally. The roots of this phobia are pretty complex. Sometimes it's a byproduct of our severe technological dependency, where our brains are hardwired to expect constant notifications. But often, it's actually trauma-informed. For individuals who grew up in emotionally unpredictable homes, silence was often the dangerous calm before the storm. Silent punishments, like being locked in a closet, can permanently wire the nervous system to view stillness as an imminent threat. Because of this, modern society often uses noise as a pharmaceutical. Have you ever left the TV on just so you can fall asleep? People compulsively use podcasts, music, and screens to drown out intrusive thoughts. Research even shows that individuals with lower levels of GABA, which is a key neurotransmitter, have a biological disadvantage when it comes to suppressing unwanted thoughts in a quiet room. They literally need the noise to cope.
Section 6. Reclaiming the void. Facing the inner world. Living our entire lives just running away from the quiet comes with a really heavy cost to our mental and physical health. So how do we overcome this deep-seated evolutionary fear and actually rewire our nervous systems to tolerate and eventually benefit from the void?
Well, therapists use specific strategies to teach the panicked brain that a lack of sound does not inherently equal a threat. This includes gradual exposure therapy, starting with maybe just a few minutes of quiet at a time. It also involves mindfulness-based cognitive therapy to help people observe their intrusive thoughts without reacting to them, and compassion work to quiet that harsh inner critic that gets so incredibly loud in the silence. So, the crucial point is that pushing through this discomfort is incredibly rewarding. Science clearly shows that controlled silence is profoundly regenerative. Just 15 minutes of quiet can significantly lower your blood pressure, drop your cortisol stress levels, and, remarkably, even stimulate the growth of brand new neurons in the brain's hippocampus.
We really have to change our perspective here. Silence is not some empty void waiting to swallow us up. As this quote beautifully frames it, silence is a profound presence. It is the only space where we can truly hear the incredible bodily orchestra keeping us alive and finally confront the essential narrative of who we are without all the external distractions. It's a space for true internal sovereignty.
We've spent millions of years evolving to fear the drop in our acoustic shield, and we've built a modern world completely overflowing with constant, distracting sound. But true clarity, that requires stepping into the quiet. So I'll leave you with this. Are you brave enough to turn off the TV, pause the background music, and finally listen to what the silence is trying to tell you? Thanks for joining me on this explainer.